at some point, we had a moment where she asked me, so what do you do again? Anyway, and oh my God, like for I think a whole 3 minutes, she was 100% listening, like she was there. And I was like, wow, it was so weird. I was like, you can really feel the difference. But yeah, anyway, it was interesting. It was fine. They're lovely. It's just odd because we don't see them often in the end. Last time it was like 2 years ago. And yeah, it's so weird to see how people live. And yeah, that was me and my in-laws, Sally.
Thank you.
They were here this week. And they left last night.
Right.
It was and his dad's 70th birthday.
Thank you. I was trying to fill in the gaps. I was trying to think, who might it be? But I was like, oh.
Yeah, no, that was a hard one to guess. How about you, Sally?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. I didn't pick up the message. I was like waiting on Bron's call. And then I thought, well, I better check my messages. And I'm like, oh, yeah, swap calls.
How was your week?
Yes, it's gone so quickly. That's a strange thing. It really, one day it's Monday and the next day it's Friday. They do really, really, really go quickly, the weeks. I don't know why. It's very odd.
I agree. Where are you? Like, you're working from home or you're back at work?
Yeah, no, still working from home. Our office is closed in March, opened for 2 weeks in September and then closed again. So I don't know. I can't imagine reading the news at the moment when they'll open again. Yeah, I've got used to it now. I don't really think about it as a thing. I don't really think about going back to the office as a thing. I'm sure it will be. I hope it will be, but it isn't at the moment. Yeah, so everything happens at home. I don't think there's much that happens outside the home.
Yeah.
Looks like we're heading into another national lockdown.
That's the thing. I was, France went back. And yeah, usually we're not far behind.
Yeah. The bit that was in France where I read, I'm like, oh, I really wouldn't want to go back to that. Even though I don't go out every day, even for 5 minutes, would be the whole thing where you can only go out for an hour. For exercise. I'm like, oh, that. I mean, this week I haven't been out. That's the irony.
Oh, wow. You need to go out, Sally.
I know.
And I know how easy it is not to go, especially with this disgusting weather.
I know.
Get a dog.
Yeah.
Get a dog. Honestly, I'm so glad I've got the dog. Otherwise, yeah, I'll just work nonstop.
Yeah,
I think lots of people have got dogs during lockdown. When I go for a walk around here, the population of dogs seems to have doubled, I think.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of dogs, isn't there? The price.
Is there?
But I'm sure there is still plenty of dogs that needs to be adopted.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
It's the people trying to buy their design.
I know they want puppies, but get an adult dog that needs a home. And this way you know what you get. Sometimes puppies, oh, they're cute, and then, oh my God, it's massive. And there is that's how you have lots of problems. Anyway. Is Bron not coming today?
So Bron will come if she can, but there's some sort of drama at home and she's not.
Okay. Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if we wait. I don't have anything special to share. My week was looking after my in-laws.
So you didn't see anything new in you as a reflection of your in-laws then?
What I could see is how more, usually I get I can get really frustrated with my mother-in-law in the way, anyway, I won't go into like details, but I can get really frustrated about certain things. But this time I could see Yanni was getting, and I think maybe that helped. So I was like, you know what, like there is no point for you to try, to go against that. That's how she is. And you just like, if you get annoyed at her, she's getting all defensive, and that doesn't help. I was just like, you calm down, and you basically just sharing where you are and how you do things. Hopefully she'll hear a few things. And there are things that she hears. How much she's gonna do, it's another thing, but you can tell she hears, and she knows that, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. And there are a few moments where she was like, oh, look, I didn't do, did it? I was like, well done. But yeah, I didn't get too frustrated like I would. And that was quite nice. And I was like, there's no point. That won't change anything. They're just gonna make me feel bad. And her not feel comfortable in the end, because you feel when the other one is frustrated. So I want her to,
less reactive sort of thing.
yeah.
So you,
And I want her to be comfortable when she's here, when, and not feel like, oh well, I'm being judged for what I do, even if, anyway, like she knows. It's just she doesn't, and she's just not there yet. And that's it, is like that thing of she's not there yet, she needs to figure it out for herself, that we've discussed before. I was like, I'm not here to change her. I can share how I see things, but not, putting it onto her. So that helped a lot.
So you weren't trying to fix her, which is something, and you were less reactive, but it sounds like you were still somewhat irritated.
It's not, that's the thing, I don't feel irritation. I feel it feels a bit sad, because you can really see that they get really anxious about all that, but it's like it's bigger than them. It's like yeah, you can really see that they're not in control when it comes to that. And yeah, it's sad to see that, and yeah. And it's funny how there is like, before we're like thinking, oh, maybe we should spend like the summer there with them, and and spend 6 weeks. And we had them a few days, and I'm like, when you say we should spend the summer, maybe we shouldn't. And it's fine, but it's just, we just live so differently. It just wouldn't work. And then they get frustrated because they can't do it their own way. And at some point you get, that's why as well, I'm like, his dad is reaching 70. You're like, if you do it your way. And it's, that's it, you want the best for them, but eventually, we tried initially with at the beginning of the week when they were here, I was feeding them what we eat. That's another subject. I can talk about the food. I'm not talking about the rest, but so like they love, and that's the thing. A lot of his mom doesn't eat a lot of things. Oh no, that's good. That makes me bloated. Oh, I can't do that. I don't digest. Oh, that is not good. Da, da, da. I don't do rice because it's not good for you. And da, da, I don't do pepper. Anyway, she does nothing. And but then actually I realized you cook, and then she loves everything. Just like forgetting about all her conviction. And but yeah, we try to make them eat like what we consider be healthy, because we know they're not really eating well. And they were nice and all, but I could tell they were like, oh God. So then we're like, okay, on his birthday we did a big meal with, oh my God. And they were like, oh, that's it, you did that so we could appreciate today. But and I felt, that's the thing, I felt like I am sort of imposing how I see things, and because that's not how they see it's a nice way to eat. For them, it doesn't work. They don't see that as me looking after them, because in their head, it's just weird. It's not a healthy diet. And actually, I realized that I was like, oh my God, yes, of course. It's like in their world, it is not nice. Like I don't bring them red meat every day. So imagine, like they were like, oh my God, it's for them, they felt they were missing. And so that was, it's so interesting. Again, it's like just for the food thing, but it's, yeah, when in your world things make sense, even if from, and again, it's like, yeah, maybe from my point of view, it's not the best way. In their world, it makes sense. And yeah, so we let go toward the end. We're like, okay, say I'm adding extra dates in the smoothie, so it's sweet. It's like, oh my God, you put sugar now. I was like, yeah, I don't think we should, but it's fine. And yeah, and I felt, yeah, that was pushing it a bit too much. I think we needed to adapt to them. Anyway, I don't have big.
You have
You
more
didn't get any big. Yeah, but because it's hard, because in my world, I feel I'm not looking after them. So it was really this like conflict, because I want to give them good food and so they feel better, and they have some health issues, and I was reading before they came on, oh, they need to eat some of that, it's good for inflammation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and yeah, yeah, that's it. I want them to be happy, so it needs to match their world, but then it goes against mine, and it's really difficult. I feel I'm like pushing. It's like someone who smokes. If you give them a cigarette, and I used to smoke, but I don't anymore. If you give them a cigarette, they're happy, but at the same time, yeah, it's like I'm pushing you towards your grave, sort of thing. And it's this conflict between the two that is not easy.
I guess it's back to the issue about whether you're their doctor or coach or
Yeah.
whether you.
Yeah, but then it means then I'm not aligned with my world either, because then I don't eat the way I want, for example. I take the eating example. So then that goes against what I do, what I believe. So then does that make sense to as well? It's like, does that make sense?
Yeah. What you're helping me to see, Sandrine, through sharing that, is you're helping me to see that, because we could have whole panels of experts and people come on to join us, and there wouldn't be, I'm guessing, one right answer to what you've described. There can't be one single right answer. So what you're helping me see is that when I get caught up in my thinking about something, not that scenario, but something that feels like the scenario you've just described, you're helping me see that whenever I'm in all of that thinking about all those different options, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing this, but I want to do it for this reason, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to get clear because I'm so caught up in my thinking. And that's what you're helping me to see, is I don't know what the answer would be and where there might be an answer. But when I'm caught up in thinking like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I keep thinking if I keep looking harder and keep looking more even more scientifically, like this is better or this will work better, I'm not going to reach clarity because I'm just in a whirlwind of thinking about something. So for me, that really, listening to you talk about something that's not my example, but I can imagine, but what I could feel was all the feeling of all the thoughts going in different directions. I'm like, oh yeah, that's when we get caught up and don't have a good feeling because we're just caught up in our own thinking.
Lovely observation, Sally. Yeah, you just helped me to realise that I was caught up in the content of what Sandrine was saying, not noticing in a sense where she was coming from when she talked about it.
I was thinking as well that it's what you were describing, Sandrine, is like basically every conflict that's ever happened in terms of, you know, two sides really believing in how they view the world. And you know, even with the food example, what we consider to be healthy is a product of our culture that we live in. So I think I'm right in saying there was a point in time when sugar was considered to be really, really healthy. It was like considered to be this amazing food. And then now maybe we don't see it kind of the same way. But as you were talking, I was just thinking, you're basically summing up every single conflict that's ever been in the example. So that was interesting, I thought.
No, it's true. Is because, and it comes back to everyone, they do the best they can within what they have, their world, and I do the same. And what I consider maybe good today might change tomorrow, and I'm so conscious of that because I've seen how that changed just by, you know, you read more, you learn more, and then oh my god, and you discover different things, and then what you believe in change. But it's almost, yeah, it sounds like, oh well, no, that's scientific, but it's still you believe or not. And it's yeah, you can apply that to so many things. And people have good reason when they do, I mean, in their head seems like a really good reason to do what you do, no matter what it is. So yeah.
But also we often have two reasons in our head. So like, you know, I so right, Claire, about the conflict. And then the conflict is also in our own head. Because Sandrine, when you were talking, we don't, you know, mind just carrying on using your example for a moment. It's like you had the conflict of knowing about kind of what foods you were thinking would bring health to them, and at the same time there's a conflict, but I want them to be comfortable and I want them to have a really nice time, and so there's kind of even there's conflict just within one person, and then as Claire says, you know, expand that out and it's conflict with kind of other parties as well. So that's what's so interesting, and that's all the noise, isn't it, in our heads.
I could feel that. I could feel like initially I was like happy because I was like, oh, that could be so healthy for them, so good for them. I felt like I was looking after them. And then I was like, shit, I'm just like, that's maybe too far. And they're not enjoying it. They came back from the shop with sushi and stuff. I was like, oh my God. And I think it's just they're excited. They live on a little island. They don't have sushi place. So they were like really excited to have some. Anyway, and then I was like, okay, I felt bad because I was, yeah, giving food that and that's the thing, they didn't say anything, but that I thought they wouldn't like as much. And actually, then my husband was like, well, they told me they loved your things and it was fine. So as well, I maybe made up a bit of what I thought they were thinking, you know.
I read something this week. It was just a small quote, but it made me think about something, which was sounds so small and trivial, but it was the phenomenon of, you know, when you're on a Zoom call and someone's dog or cat appears, and it was someone who's like doing their TV show, and they must be recording it, you know, on Zoom at the moment, or virtually. And the quote was something like, you know, I always thought, you know, I was popular because I was, I don't know, humorous or clever or blah, blah, blah. But my ratings have never been as high as when my cat came on and I picked my cat up. And I was like, that's so interesting from the perspective of, what is it about a cat or dog appearing on screen that makes us feel, I don't know, just lifts our spirits or makes us feel good? Or like, you know, the person with the cat or the dog is trying to get the cat or dog off screen, and I'm busy thinking, no, leave the dog, leave the cat, I want to see them. And I thought, when I read that kind of quote, I was like, oh, what occurred to me was, I think why it's pleasurable to see the kind of, you know, dog or cat suddenly appear is we live in the feeling of our thinking. And in that moment when something unexpected happens that's, you know, pleasant and fun and benign, it stops all our normal thinking that we may not even be aware of. But if we're living in the feeling of our thinking, and our thinking is evaluative or analytical or judgmental or stressed or a bit distressed or, you know, racing a bit fast, and then suddenly something comes and interrupts it and stops our thinking, we're no longer living in the feeling of that thinking in the moment, and we just go back to that nicer place when there's no kind of thought running through our head. And I was like, well, that's, I think, what happens when something, and this happens to be a little cat or a dog coming on screen, just it stops where you're thinking that, and you kind of default to that place of kind of not living in the feeling of your thinking, whatever your thinking is. You just go back into that moment of kind of well-being and peace and calmness. And oh, anyway, that was my take on what happens when the cats and the dogs of the world appear on screen, and why it's nice. I'm sure it's not nice for everyone. I'm sure some people, ironically, will be, you know, irritated or frustrated or distracted, but that's them living in the feeling of their experience also. And they may be calmer when the cat disappears, who knows? But I was just interesting. So it was a small and trivial point, but I was like, oh, it was interesting to me.
And it comes back to the feeling again, doesn't it? I mean, it's so fascinating, because I feel like I forget that so often. And yet, you know, the clues are always with us, aren't they? And yet it's just sometimes we spot them and sometimes we don't. But I feel like I have that regularly, thinking, oh yeah, it's the feeling again. Oh yeah.
And to me, Claire, I think it would be that I don't know that I forget that my thinking has a feeling to it. So if I'm attaching, I don't know, to carry on with my example, if I'm attaching the feeling to the Zoom call and it's kind of, you know, boring or irritating, or I don't like the presenter, or whatever it is, and then something comes that distracts me, or just stops that thinking, I may not have been aware that it was my thinking that had a feeling, because I'm attaching my thinking to something specific. And that's what I think I forget, is it's my, you know, when I do forget it, it's forgetting that it's my thinking that has a feeling, and I just may not be aware that I'm in my thinking, and that's what I'm experiencing. I think I'm experiencing something outside of me that has its own feeling. But no, nothing outside of me has its own feeling. It's only my thinking that has a feeling. And that's what I'm experiencing in any given moment.
And it's not as if we're sort of talking about going around life with a microscope, sort of looking at how we're feeling all the time. But I suppose for me, when it's at some point when I'm feeling whatever, you know, not kind of content or whatever, at some point there'll be a moment of realization. But it's just sort of funny that sometimes it seems to take quite a long time. But that's just the nature of the thing, I suppose.
I'm playing at the moment with, because I've been going through quite a bumpy time, in the sense that I have not spent a lot of time in the nice feeling. And
Frank, your sound is not so good. I can barely hear you.
right, okay. Let's try this. Right, is that any better?
A bit.
Yeah, it's a bit louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I can. Is he still quiet for you, Claire?
Claire's
Go on,
still not-
go on, go on, try.
Okay, I'll just try and speak up. I don't know what's going on. So I have been struggling quite a lot lately, just in the sense that, you know, I've spent a lot of time in a reasonably low place, and I think what I hadn't really realized was that, you know, I guess I was seeing it more and more as external things. And those external things can also be kind of internal, in the sense that they were, you know, I was kind of beginning to attribute, I don't know, in some way or other, that I was going mentally through a bad patch, or, you know, something like that, because it still seemed like circumstance and something other than what we talk about all the time. But I've just been playing around with, I guess, a little bit more intentionality, a bit more direct intention to notice more, because we talk about noticing, and I think the way we generally talk about noticing is kind of, you know, it happens when it happens. But it occurred to me that there can also be, to a degree anyway, a kind of intention about that. So you know, what I've been just playing with is where I have my to-do list. I have a piece that says, look for the feeling. And I sort of copy that down after every task. So when I go back to see what else I'm going to do, I kind of remind myself to check in where I am, and kind of to look for the feeling. And I know what I really mean by that, but I suppose it's looking in the direction that we're talking about, looking in the direction that says, the experience I'm having is not attributable to what's out there, what's the next thing on my to-do list, or anything else. It's like I can in some way get in touch with a better feeling at any point, just by my kind of intention to look for it, rather than just being completely open to whatever shows up. And I know, in a way, it's still kind of, you know, what happens. But it does certainly seem at the moment anyway that my intention on it can help and that can make a difference. And maybe it's partly because I feel like I've just kind of, I've been in a pit for a while, and I'm sort of trying to look for the ladder to get out. And it, you know, on the basis of yesterday, I had a really, really good day. I just didn't end up in that same place that I've been in a lot of the time recently. So for the moment anyway, that feels like the right thing to look for. And it kind of seems to me that, in a sense, there is an element of pattern or conditioning or habit, I suppose. You know, if my habitual thinking is to look outside and, you know, attribute my uncomfortable state to what I see, then in a sense, what surely is helpful is to try and have some pattern that does something different, that looks and reminds myself of what we're looking to see. Because in a sense, that's, you know, what we spend a lot of time talking about is we know how this works, but often we just don't get in touch with it enough. And I think when we're in flow, it kind of just follows. But when we're in a lower state, just kind of reminding ourselves more deliberately can be helpful to just reconnect with what we're looking for. So that's my experiment. I'm not saying it's, you know, I've got a voice in my head saying, well, not a voice, but, you know, a question, I suppose, about whether this is off what we're talking about. You know, this isn't really the correct way of looking at all of this. But it's helpful to me at the moment. So I just thought I'd share it.
Frank, it sounds great to me in terms of it's still looking in the same place, in the same direction. That's what I like about it. It feels, yeah, it feels of the same thing. It feels of the same place that we're looking in. And we've talked about when we forget. And so what you've described to me is not looking in a direction, it's just a kind of little prompt to remember where to look. Yeah. Yeah, because I was just thinking about to-do lists and the variety of experience I can have looking at my to-do list. You know, if there are 20 items on that to-do list, you know, I can go through every item and have a different experience. Whereas I think what you're pointing to is the reminder to know where that experience is coming from.
The to-do list is quite interesting because I put things on the to-do list that, you know I'll enjoy, and then I put other things on that I think I would like to get done. you know, but routinely they're the ones that are still on the list at the bottom of the day. So what I'm kind of exploring is just, you know, I work out what I'd like to get done, and then when I come to that one, instead of sort of jumping over and thinking I'll do one of the ones, or going to have a cup of coffee or whatever else, is just to recognize that that feeling that I've got about that thing is the same as we're talking about in every other way. And just, I guess, looking in this direction just means, in a way, to me, being open to the fact that I could have another experience other than the one I kind of immediately engage with when I think about that.
And it'll be fun.
Sorry, go on, Sandy.
No, but it'll be funny to, once you've done it, to actually check in again and see if it's the same feeling. Because often, like, there is things that, oh, I can't be bothered to do that, and actually you do it, you're like, oh my God, I'm so happy I've done it.
Actually,
And the feeling is so different.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I'm finding. It's like I notice that I've got, you know, reluctance on some basis, and I kind of look in this direction we're talking about, which is just to remind myself that that is just me, you know, creating it, and then in some way that seems to kind of lower the barrier to starting the task. And then once I go into the task, it's like, it's a different experience from what I anticipated it being. And there's great satisfaction from kind of achieving something that you've been putting off for 3 weeks or something. But also it was like, it was fun because, in a sense, in a way, what you tend to do with those tasks is you push them away. You kind of don't want to engage with them. But when you do engage with them, when you kind of wholeheartedly say, I'm going to do this, it's like all that other thinking goes away, and you just kind of are present with that task, and it takes on a different form, it changes.
And I think just that what you said now is just because you're fully engaging with just that task and just fully there, is actually like, it's a bit of a meditation sort of thing, because you're just there, and you don't have all these other thoughts that can be annoying and bring you down, and that's what I feel like is amazing with some of the tasks that that you say, oh, I don't like washing the cleaning the bathroom. But actually, once you do it, and if you like really do it, it's the best thing ever, and you come back out of it like, not only is done, but on top of it you feel better because you did a bit of cleaning inside as well. But it's like, yet the week after, when you get to do it again, it's like, oh no, I don't like doing that. But I'm sure eventually, if you notice after it, eventually it will be reprogrammed in a different way, right?
Yeah, and I think, just in a sense, noticing how the feeling you can have can change so quickly and completely to something else is also a kind of reinforcement of what we're talking about. You know, it must become even more familiar, more obvious, more certain, you know, a more solid belief, I suppose, that this is really how it works, not just a good idea.
Yeah. And then it's not about doing that things, it's about, exploring and playing with your feelings. So all of a sudden you want to try to do things that maybe you've been pushing out. It's so interesting because that's interesting. Love that.
I've heard people talk about this kind of thing before, you know, in terms of like you know, if this is true, then it's possible to have a different feeling irrespective of what you're doing. And it's good to hear you talk about it, because my experience is that on the moments when I have thought that before, it sort of means that I can take whatever I'm feeling less lightly. But for me so far, I don't think it's ever come with the sort of freedom that comes when stuff just naturally clears out the way. So it's an interesting discussion, really, I suppose, just because it is something that I've wondered about a bit, just because for me so far that's been the consistent pattern. That, and I suppose it's still because when I'm thinking, oh, I can have a different experience, I'm still thinking, so therefore I've not really yet dropped it, kind of thing.
And I think it's just like, because you're still in your head while doing it, and actually is just doing the thing, how, no matter how mundane and simple it is, just doing that without being anywhere else. I feel that's what's really make a difference to me.
Claire, are you saying that, in effect, that you haven't seen that things can look one way and then, in a sense, quite swiftly can change to something else? Not necessarily every time you want them to, but that you haven't had that experience where things have just looked different?
No, I've had that experience, definitely, but for me, it feels like there's a qualitative difference between when that just happens apparently spontaneously and when I sort of am trying to make it happen, or have the thought of I could be experiencing this differently. It feels different, but I suppose it is different just because one's I don't know how to say it, one's sort of being forced or something, and one's spontaneous.
I mean, it's not that I'm thinking like I'm in some way choosing to feel different. I'm just reminding myself that that possibility exists. Because I think you're right. If you kind of turn it into a control, then in a sense that won't take you anywhere useful, because that is, you know, that's akin to me to some form of, you know, positive thinking, or you're forcing it. Whereas when what you do is simply kind of reconnect with the fact that you know that this has happened before and it could happen here, and that all you're ever doing is experiencing, you know, your mind. So your mind could shift at any point because it looks at it differently, and that I think is an important part of it. It's just holding that possibility, or reminding yourself of that possibility. But because it's that, it also means that the possibility is that it won't change at that particular point. I'm just finding that the more I'm kind of asking myself that question, or reminding myself that that works, that kind of opens me up more likely to, you know, as long as I think that what is happening is that I'm, you know, is some consequence of what's going on outside, or, you know, that this task is inherently a crap task, then I'm kind of cutting myself off from the possibility of seeing it in another way. If I'm not willing to consider that, then it can't, you know, it's like I just won't see it. It's hidden from view. But the fact that I kind of am willing to consider that there is another way and remind myself of that means I'm a bit more likely to look and notice something that I wasn't seeing before.
I think what those two things are pointing to for me is they're very helpful in that they remind me that every thought has its own feeling, every thought has its own feeling. So when you're talking about what you're experiencing, Frank, your feeling of asking, having that just as a question, as a possibility, that thought has a feeling to it. And it's a kind of open, whatever, it's an open feeling, it's a more relaxed feeling. And then the feeling that Claire speaks about, which I recognize as that kind of control thinking, like, I know this could be different, or that's a thought, and that thought has a feeling to it, and that's a more constricted feeling, and it's a more closing down feeling. So what this is pointing me to is, again, it's not in the particular words of the question. It's in the feeling of the thought that you're in at that moment. Because I could imagine, Frank, that your question, in the wrong mood, someone could ask that question in a right old gnarly frame of mind. There must be another feeling to this, thing. So it's the feeling that goes with the thought, the place that you're coming from in your thinking, I think.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I said what I do, and what I've actually got in my to-do list is look for the feeling.
Mm.
So although I've talked about, the mental train of thought that's ended up my explanation for what's going on, what I'm actually doing is looking for the feeling, which in a sense has, I guess, a bit that says, where am I now? What feeling am I in now? But also kind of looks for, that feeling that we're talking about of freedom, of openness, or just a better feeling, a nicer feeling. And that's actually what I'm doing. I'm just looking for the feeling, whatever that kind of means to me.
Yeah.
But it's another one. I suppose it's a version of what Dickens talks about, when he does his fall back into the self, or that open and expansive feeling. It's I think you're right. The feeling is in a way a better way of talking about this, because if you do it from the perspective of the feeling, you're not paying attention to the thinking, you're not paying attention to the thoughts, you're not doing it mentally, intellectually.
Yeah, I really like the way you summarise that, Sally, as well. I think that's really helpful. And also, I was just sitting here thinking, well, I think I'm just basically lazy because I like it when it happens on its own, and it feels like magic, doesn't it? And I don't know, there's something about that I just find, I just really like it. Just magically, you find yourself in this place that is familiar but is lovely at the same time,
Well, Claire, I don't think it's lazy. I think it's genuinely the only way it happens. That control and that efforting, go back to our conversation about looking for the feeling. When you've got that feeling of control and efforting, it's not there, is it? We all know it's not there. Yeah. It's a kind of pushing on the door which has to be pulled kind of thing. You can effort all you like, but you're traveling in the wrong direction. Not you, just all of us. Yeah,
and pre-principles, like before I came across this understanding, I would have that wondering of like, how come sometimes I can do this thing, whatever it might be, and it's just really easy and there's nothing to it, and then other time it feels like the most difficult thing in the world. And at that point it was so confusing, because it was like, when I would hear people talk about techniques and stuff, I'd be like, yeah, but when it happens, I don't need that, because it doesn't need a technique. It just happens. And I just found it so confusing. And then, discovered this, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and the last thing that keeps popping for me is that if a feeling is the length of a thought, then to go back to like the bathroom cleaning example or this example of like, it's like when you're in it, when your thought changes, your experience changes. And I know that when I look at something on my to-do list and I don't do it, I get stuck in the thought that I'm thinking about that thing, which is an entirely different experience from the flow of thought that will start when I'm and you know, there may be some things I start doing and I actually feel worse doing them. I mean, I know that wouldn't be desirable, but it does show that again my thought has changed. it's gone in a horror, you know, in a direction I don't like. I'm now feeling worse about doing it when I started. But again, that it does show that thought just changes, and the thing itself does not have one static feeling thought attached to it. Whereas if you were looking for only one direction of travel, then that would be frustrating and odd. But if what I'm looking to is just to understand the nature of thought is fluid and the nature of feeling is fluid, then that does point back to exactly that same principle.
There's almost two things. Sorry.
After you.
I don't know. I'm just thinking now. It's like there is two things. There is really like the feeling that comes with things when we do things. That's one thing, like the real thing. And we know that that is not linked to what we do. So, yeah. And there is what seems like the feeling, but it's like what we think of that thing, which is something that is almost not matching the feeling we have when we do the thing. It's like, you know, there's things, I don't know, maybe that makes no sense the way I said it, but like there's things that you love the idea of doing, but actually when you do them, it doesn't feel as good. But I think it's two different things. There is like what we think of cleaning the bathroom. We think, oh, that's in the box of the things I don't want to do. That feels not good, da da da. But then when we're like talking, the feeling we're talking about is so different about whether we like cleaning the bathroom or not. But so often we like associate, because in the end, however you're going to feel that day at that time when you clean the bathroom, it's got nothing to do with the bathroom and what you're doing in it. It's just that feeling at that time. So it's almost we kind of, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I think I've been really sort of mixing the two and associating, thinking, obviously, because cleaning the bathroom is in that box in my head, that is not the nice thing. I'm gonna not be in a good place when I do it. When actually it's completely two different things. One is the thing I believe that goes in this box, da da da, and the other thing is how I feel at that time. And when, yeah, it's got no link actually. Just thinking about that now. I don't know if that's, yeah.
I think there's three things.
Ah.
Well, I suppose the distinction I hear you making is that you can have some thinking about how you anticipate or predict something will be. And that's probably to an extent a kind of habitual thing. That's kind of what you've decided at some point.
Yeah.
Then you've got the experience of actually doing it, which is kind of very much in the moment. But I guess that there's also kind of the kind of mood you are in when you do it, which is another part of that. So in a sense, you know, you could go to your favorite restaurant but you could be in a grumpy mood and not appreciate the restaurant at all. So even though your habitual thing is that, you know, you normally really like that restaurant, it just doesn't, you know, as far as you're concerned, the chef had a bad day or whatever, you're probably going to attribute it outside. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just different levels of talking about it, isn't it? Because it's all thought and feeling tied together. It's just, some of it's what we anticipate and some of it's what we're kind of, but when we anticipate, that's the one that's present for us at that point, isn't it? So we're thinking forward about cleaning the bathroom and we've got negative associations of the experience, and that's kind of what we will anticipate.
And sometimes you wonder why, because you know, nothing terrible ever happened while doing the bathroom, but somehow is in that box. It's so weird, huh? And so often I catch myself being like, I'm so happy afterwards, like, you know, and even doing it, I do my thing, put my podcast, is fine. So that's why I'm like, why do I still put it in that box? It's weird, huh? Like there is something bigger that says, no, that definitely is in the box of things you don't want to do. Anyway.
We're just coming up to 10 o'clock. I have a poem from the book, if anybody, if that appeals to anybody.
Go on, go on.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. It's called Shadow Dance. My thoughts are like the shadows that when young filled me with fright. The monsters that surrounded me till Mum turned on the light. When the light was off, 'twas scary. With light on, there was relief. The world, it hadn't changed a bit, just thought changed my belief. My thoughts create illusions, then a certain way I feel, happy or sad, scared or mad, yet none of it is real. When thoughts begin their shadow dance and peace from me is gone, there is a light switch to my mind. Deeper feelings, turn it on.
Thank you. I feel that fitted perfectly with our conversation today.
Had you planned it before? Or did you pick that one just now?
It's what do they call it? Synergy, or no? I had picked it before, so it's coincidence or.
But in the end, we often talk about that, so I feel it's a bit like,
yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a lovely week.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to talk to you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.